Welcome to Garage Gym Athlete Ask Me Anything. It's pretty simple. I'll be answering questions from the thousands of athletes that follow our daily programming. If you have a question or topic you want submitted, go to garagegymathlete.com/AMA. Let's get started. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Garage Gym Athlete Podcast. Jerred Moon here with Joe Courtney. What's up, Joe?
Hey, what's up?
Not much, man. Jumping into an Ask Me Anything. Today we have a question from Ryan. Ryan asks, what is heart rate variability? How do I measure it? What am I looking for with it? And how do I improve it? Love the show and the programming. Thank you. Well, thank you, Ryan. So we will get into this one. HRV. Joe and I have a lot of experience with just HRV, tracking HRV, looking at the data, seeing if it's useful, really years of it. So let me just briefly discuss what it is. So heart rate variability is the measure of variability between heart rates or heartbeats. So your heart does not beat in a normal pattern. So if you were to have a 60 beat per minute heart rate, meaning one beat every second, it's not actually 1 second my heart beats, 1 second it beats again, 1 second it beats again. That's not what your heart is actually doing. What it's doing is it's taking 0.7 milliseconds to beat and then 1.3 milliseconds to beat, and it keeps jumping back and forth. And so the measure of that over a time, let's say a minute, is your heart rate variability. So it's the variation between heartbeats. And the more variability you have, the better. And so that's very different for people, because when you're looking at resting heart rate, typically the lower the better for athletes. And with heart rate variability, the higher the better. And I have a lot more to say about that, but it's just meaning that your body is more prepared to take on a challenge. You know, you're more in a rested state, and that's the short of it. I'll talk about how to improve it, things that we've done. But Joe, what's your take on heart rate variability?
So one of the things he asked is, how do you measure it? And usually your wearable is going to measure it for you. So ours, for the longest time, we had Whoop measures it. Apple Watch, you can get measure it now. The Oura Ring, yours measures it. Garmin does not. It has its own heart rate variability. It gives its own score. It's like a small decimal number. I still haven't figured out that completely, but it's not like your typical 3-digit or whatever, 50 to 150 or whatever number. And I do remember that it was something that I would look into, because it would affected how I would do my recovery, my nutrition, and things like that.
Yeah. And one thing to know, I've struggled with this, like heart rate variability. Is it actually useful information? And I don't know if it is. There are studies saying that it is, so I'm not going to try and fight the science on it. I've looked at a lot of HRV studies, but it is very, very much correlated, and there's studies on this too. It's very, very much correlated to your resting heart rate. So if you have like a really low resting heart rate, low for you, and that's one thing I want people to know. Like with resting heart rate, there is kind of like standards. Like if you're in the 40s, that's good. Joe, if you're in the 30s. And then if your resting heart rate is like 100, that's bad. But heart rate variability is not like that. Heart rate variability is very much independent per person. Like I've seen really good athletes have like a heart rate variability on the high side of 40 milliseconds and on the low 20 milliseconds. And I've also seen people who aren't that fit with like heart rate variabilities like at 200 and, down to like 120. And so I really don't think that it's like resting heart rate. Like I think it's very independent per person. So that's one thing to know. You shouldn't really compare your HRV to anyone else. It's just your HRV compared to yourself over time is what you're looking for. And I was just going to say that there is the resting heart rate. Like if you have a low resting heart rate, that typically low for you means you're going to have high HRV. And if you have a high resting heart rate, you're going to have low HRV. It's very correlative data, 100%.
I did find that heart rate variability is much more erratic than resting heart rate. My resting heart rate might only fluctuate 3 beats, but my heart rate variability might be 100-point difference day to day.
Yeah. And that's why I'm not I could never manipulate it as much as I wanted to, And that's why I didn't, because I could get like everything dialed in and perfect and still have a bad HRV day or whatever. And you know, I just don't think I don't think it's that helpful. I think tracking your resting heart rate is more helpful. But yeah, as far as measuring it, Apple Watch, if you use the Breathe app on your Apple Watch, which is built in, that will force a HRV reading. If you're wondering like, how do I take it when I want to take it? The Aura Ring just takes your HRV like every minute throughout the entire night when you're sleeping. And then there's also this feature called Moments where you basically do a breathing session or a meditation session and it takes your HRV then. And you mentioned Garmin. Whoop takes it when you're sleeping and they don't let you do anything else. And that's about it. So how to improve it? That, you know, if you reduce inflammation in your diet, you know, through your diet, that's a big one. But then just exercise in general, I think, making sure you're hydrated, eating enough food, like all these things help you with your HRV. It's all basic healthy living guidelines. But you're not going to see some sort of like transformation where like my HRV is 30. How do I get it to 150? I just don't think it's going to happen for you. Like you kind of have, it's like a genetic thing to a certain degree, and you can only manipulate it so far within the parameters that you can. But I don't think it's the most useful metric that you can be tracking. I think tracking resting heart rate is far easier. You don't need a bunch of fancy equipment. You can go buy like a pulse ox, which, you know, will do respiratory rate or your oxygen saturation levels and your resting heart rate. And you can just do that in the morning. It's like one of those little finger things that you have at the doctor. Those cost like $15 and you can buy them at CVS or Walgreens, whatever. So resting heart rate, I think, is way better to track than HRV. To be honest, I'm kind of over HRV. I don't really look at it that much anymore. I do watch my resting heart rate though. I pay attention to that.
Yeah, it was cool to see and adjust recovery based on it. So like whenever I would see mine was really low, first things I would change were hydration, make sure I dialed that in that day, then protein, then carbs for just for that day. And then the next day I'd see it go up. And it's like, okay, cool. I just need to know that. But after you do it after a while, you just kind of know what to do. And I think for people that really need it, I think this is another one of those, 1% changes to where you're already doing everything very perfectly and whatnot. If you really just need to be like the most elite athlete that you want to be, then that might be a 1% thing to see how it affects. But for most people, it's not going to be that detrimental to keep it on point all the time.
Yeah. And the things that crush it are like alcohol. Like if I had 2 beers right before bed and then went to sleep, I mean, both things would happen. This is why I say pay attention to resting heart rate. My resting heart rate would go up and my heart rate variability would be in the trash. So it'd be like, if my typical resting heart rate's like 43, it would jump up to like 56. And if my typical resting heart rate variability is 120, it would go down to like 30. So there's huge drops in your HRV, but there are things that crush it. And, it's
red
cool
eye flights.
Yeah, it's cool to pay attention to those things as well. I think that's what's cool about just tracking data in general, finding out how things affect you is, I've also found eating late, it has a similar effect to alcohol, but not near as aggressive. It's just a slight, if I eat food late, alcohol. And then I really think this whole HRV and resting heart rate thing with training, I'm really more on the fence now, not fully there, but more on the fence that this is something that is a little bit more, should be reserved more for very serious athletes who train multiple times per day. Because if you're training once a day, let's say even twice, I still don't think you'll be pushing yourself so hard that you're going to get crushed. Now, I have done like Murph really hard in hot weather and seen it affect my heart rate variability and resting heart rate, so my recovery is off. But normal training, for the most part, you're not going to see any huge fluctuations. Maybe if you're just getting reintroduced to training, you will. But it won't be a factor if you're training once a day for an hour and a half, and recovering well. You won't need to track that stuff. But if you start training more, or if you go, you're going to be doing the Murph project or something like that, where you're doing a Murph every week for a year, then it might be something to pay attention to. Just make sure that, because if you do see these things trending downwards over a longer period of time, that means you're about to get sick, you're about to get injured, something's going to happen. So it is good to pay attention to for those reasons. But for most people, you won't see a lot of fluctuation if you're just keeping things normal.
Yeah, and that's when it comes in handy that you can take it on the spot, unlike Whoop. But things like Apple and Aura, and with Garmin's heart rate score, their version of it, you have to have a chest strap on and you have to actually activate it and sit there for a minute and just breathe, and then it'll give you your score to actually really tell you, whatever it does for your training.
And I actually want to look into Whoop again. I mean, I could just pull it out of my desk drawer and strap it on, but they added respiratory rate to, I think, not just the app. It's been in the app for a while, but I think they added it to their recovery score. So their recovery score used to take in 3 factors. It was resting heart rate, heart rate variability, and your sleep, previous night's sleep. And I think they added a 4th prong to that, and that's respiratory rate. And part of the respiratory rate has to do with COVID and all this other stuff. But I'm very interested to see now, because the reason I kind of moved away from Whoop is because they didn't tell you exactly what their algorithm is, but I felt like it was like 80% dependent on heart rate variability. And I just disagreed with that after using their product for 2 years. I was like, it doesn't work. And I've talked about this on multiple podcasts before, but I want to see now if so Aura already does that and they factor it into your recovery score, but I want to see if Whoop has more consistent recovery scores now that they added that respiratory rate. Talk about something that barely fluctuates. I've been tracking it since May, and I mean, respiratory rate, like, it barely changes.
Oh, with Aura?
Yeah. I mean, I can see it go back and forth or whatever, but like there's not a multi-point difference. It's a decimal difference with respiratory rate. So anyway, that's my food for thought on just recovery stuff and whatever, but hopefully that answers the HRV question.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, if you like this podcast, go ahead and leave us a 5-star review, positive comment. And then also on YouTube, you subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment there if you have a question or you think we should dive in deeper. And if you do have a question that you want answered here, go to garagegymathlete.com/AMA and we will answer it. Either way, thank you for watching or listening. I hope you enjoyed today's Ask Me Anything episode. So one more time, if you want to submit a question, topic, or idea, you can do so at garagegymathlete.com/AMA. And hey, while you're there, if you haven't already, sign up for Garage Gym Athlete membership. We are the best community and programming on the internet. I dare you to try and prove me wrong.